Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to demonstrate a couple of things around using Power Automate to manage your flows. In this example, I will extract a list of flows to an Excel file. Then using the data from the Excel file, I'll show how we can change the status of a flow from either being on or off. Okay, let's jump over to Power Automate and get started. We currently have a number of scheduled flows that send daily emails to staff as reminders or notifications. Given that we are shut down over the Christmas break, I thought it could be useful to turn these flows off and then turn them back on again when everyone is back on board. Let's start with creating the flow to save the list of flows to an Excel file. In the My Flows section, click on the New button in the toolbar and select an instant flow. Then we'll choose Manually Trigger a Flow and enter a flow name. Then click on the Create button. This will then open up a new flow with the trigger. The next step is to select the List My Flows action. If this is the first time using any of the flow management actions, you will be prompted to sign in. Once the action has been added, you can then select the environment to use. This will use the environment in which the flows are stored. If you have multiple environments and are unsure which one to use, you should be able to see the environment in the top right-hand corner of the screen. The next step is to save the list of flows to an Excel file. In order to use any of the Excel actions, you first need to have an existing Excel file. In this case, I have an Excel file stored in my OneDrive for Business account. This file contains two columns which I will use in the next flow. And before I add the list of flows to the table, I will first delete the existing rows and then add them in. In order to delete existing rows from a table in Excel, you need to have a unique identifier for each row. In this case, we can use the ID for the flow as it will be unique to each one. We can then add the list rows present in a table action, and then you'll then be prompted for the location, the document library, file name, and name of the table. We can then add the delete a row action, and again choosing the location, document library, file name, and table. You will also need to select the key column and key value. In this case, we can choose the ID column and the ID returned from the previous action. This will then wrap the delete action in a loop. The last step is to add the flows back into the Excel file. We can do this by using the add row into a table action, and again providing location, document library, file, and table names. And once you select the table name, you will then get a list of fields available in the table that you can populate. In the ID field, we will select the flow name field from the List My Flow action. This is the unique identifier for the flow. When selecting this field, it will wrap the action in a loop so that it can add all of the flows. The next field is the flow display name. This is the name of the flow. We are now ready to test or run the flow. If you click on the test button, you will then be prompted to run a test, and in this case I chose to perform the trigger action myself. This is useful if you have added new actions which require you to connect to other sources, as it will ask you to approve the connection in the flow for the first time you run it. Once the flow is finished running, we can go and look at the Excel file and we should see all of our flows. Now that we have a list of flows, we can choose which ones we want to turn off or turn back on. In this example, I'm only going to change the status of 2 scheduled flows. However, you could change the status on many flows at once. Before turning any flows off or on, it is important to understand what they're actually doing in case there are any repercussions from changing the status. You can delete any entries from the Excel file that you don't want to change. This is where the display name comes in handy. You can now close down the Excel file and go back over to Power Automate and to start to create a new flow. This can be done by selecting the Create option in the menu and then selecting Instant Flow. Then select Manually Trigger a Flow and provide a name for the flow and click Create. Once the Flow Editor screen is open, we can start working on our flow. So that this flow can be used to change the status of flows to either on or off, I'm going to add an input to the manual trigger. This input will be a yes or no field type. However, I'll change the options to off or on. This will help it make more sense later on. Once we have set up the trigger, we can now use the Excel file to get a list of flows. This can be done by adding the list rows present in a table, then selecting the location, document library, file name, and table. The next step will be to add a condition. This condition will be used for controlling the on or off functions for the flow. Then select the input off or on from the flow trigger and set the condition to is equals to true. In this case, true will be for on and false will be for off. We can now add the action to turn flows on or off in the relevant branch for the condition. We will first set the action to turn the flows on by adding the turn on flow action to the yes branch. Here we will set the environment and then change the flow field to use a custom value. We can then select the ID field from the Excel values. This will wrap the action in an apply for each loop so that it can run on whichever flows are listed in the table. We can then repeat the option for turning off the flows in the no branch, however this time using the turn off flow action. We are now ready to save and test the flow. We will need to select the I'll perform the trigger action option to set up the connections correctly with Excel and flow management, as it is the first time we are running the flow. This time we will leave the input field set to off so that the flows will turn off. Once the flow is finished running, you can verify that it has worked by going back to the My Flows screen and seeing that the flows are now grayed out and turned off. You may need to reload this page if it doesn't show correctly at first.